the Hell Fucking Yeah podcast.
Hello.
Hello, Aaron.
How are you, brother?
A pleasure to meet you, man. How are you?
Likewise. A pleasure to meet you as well. Thanks so much for having me on. I love your background setup.
Awesome. Awesome.
That's the whole thing is my kind of trip, what you got going on right there.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, man. I really appreciate that. I like the guitar in the background over there with the stripes and stars there.
You know who signed that is Wayne Kramer from the
Oh my God.
Man.
Wow. That's awesome.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Not a bad day.
Sorry if there was a miscommunication there with Zoom. Did everything work out right?
That was, you know what the problem is, man? I can't read a calendar. Apparently, is the issue. So I would.
No,
you're all good.
It's all good. I've actually never done it like that. I've never scheduled a meeting before. So, hey, it works.
I'm calling this a success.
We're here.
Yeah, exactly.
Success. We're recording. You're here. That's my Wi-Fi's not cut out. We're all good. All right. So, first of all, how are you?
Man, I'm doing good, all things considered. You know, I really can't complain. How about yourself?
Good. Yeah, same here, man.
Yeah.
You know,
good.
Kind of on the tail end of this this crazy year. You know.
Yes. Yes.
We're coming out on the other side now, I think. So, can't complain. Where are you?
Nashville, East Nashville, Tennessee.
Nice.
Yes, indeed.
That's the place to be for, especially, you know.
Yeah, it seems
for
like
music, you know.
Sure seems like it these days.
So welcome to the Hell Fucking Yeah podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited about this one. For those who don't know, Aaron is a singer, songwriter, guitarist, producer, whose critically acclaimed new album, Tasjan, exclamation points. It's available now digitally wherever you stream your music. Vinyl comes out March 19th. Hopefully that's still the date. I'm really excited about that. We'll certainly get into the new record in a bit. I've been listening to it all morning. Man, this is so goddamn good. No.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful, beautiful music. It's amazing. The whole thing is amazing. It's nearly impossible to pick a favorite song, honestly. But gun to my head, if I had to, I'm gonna go with another Lonely Day. Really like that one. I played that one a bunch of times. Really, really digging that one. You have a distinct sound, blending modern pop and folk with glam rock, psychedelia, all the while remaining in a vintage soundscape. So how did it all begin for you on this musical journey?
You know, I have a really wide range of influences in my music, you know, even to the point where, like on this record specifically, for example, you know, there's a lot of guitar on the record, more sometimes than people think, because it sounds a lot like synthesizers, but a lot of those were purposefully sort of not disguised guitars, but guitars that I made specifically to sound like that.
Sure.
And I you know, I borrowed some techniques in that department from people like St. Vincent, you know, like I love the way she'll just do a single note on the guitar of fuzz, you know, like huge burst of sound, but it just has this kind of, it's cooler that she just is using one note to do it. Like the chords in that setting get a little too almost Harley Davidson kind of for my taste. So I love like that concept of just one note that just sounds super blown out and distorted in this sort of sea of kind of shimmering and, you know, dreamy kind of, you know, a lot. There's a few bands that sort of employ that kind of tactic. But you know, what I kind of like, my music doesn't really sound like St. Vincent, obviously, you know, it sounds totally different. So a lot of my influences are like that. Like they come from places that aren't necessarily what you would expect musically, but it's more of the ideas that some of those artists that are employing that like I find interesting and like feel, you know, could work, you know, in a similar way in my own music, which even though it's different, you know, it's kind of like, that's what I love about music. You know, there is a common language there that, you know, we all sort of trade on. And it's one of the things that, you know, makes it feel so special. Like, you can sort of connect with other musicians without even saying a word in that way sometimes. You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
it's a cool language to speak. Yeah.
Absolutely. So at what age did you pick up the guitar?
I was 11.
11.
You know, and my family, we moved from Wilmington, Delaware to San Juan Capistrano, California. And my mom and I were shopping at Vaughn's grocery store. And on our way out the door, I saw that next door was a guitar shop. And the name of the guitar shop was Americana Music. And it had a sign in the window that said guitar lessons, first lesson free. And since it was free, I was able to kind of like talk my mom into let me give it a shot, you know?
That's fantastic. So now, growing up, getting older now, you went to Berkeley for a short period, right?
I sure did.
What made you leave? You left early, right?
I did. Yeah, I was only there for a semester. I did learn a lot of stuff while I was there, including, a lot about kind of who I was. I think I had, as I mentioned, I came from an incredibly diverse musical background. Like when I was 16 years old, I wrote a folk song that Peter Yarrow from Peter, Paul and Mary heard and invited me to sing with him. And I sang Blowing in the Wind with Peter from Peter, Paul and Mary. And my parents were like, whoa, this is crazy. And then later that same year, as a member of the Columbus Youth Jazz Orchestra big band, where we were literally playing like the music of Duke Ellington and Count Basie and some hipper, newer stuff like Charles Mingus, as well. But later that same year, I went to the essentially Ellington competition in New York City, played at A.V. Fisher Hall. The judges of the competition were like Wynton Marsalis and Victor Goins, and I was the only kid there who didn't play a solo. I never played I didn't even plug my guitar into an amp. I really tried to do the big band, Freddie Green, block chords. Almost makes it sound like the drums are playing chords in the band, if you will.
Right.
And I won the Outstanding Guitarist Award. So it, like I'm coming to it from this place of like, sort of all kinds of different, music. And, my training, is sort of more in that jazz place. My scholarship to Berkeley was for jazz guitar performance. And I think I basically just figured out, after being there for a couple of months, like, I think what I really want to do is the songwriting thing. And I feel like it would, the best way to learn the set of skills that I need to do that successfully was sort of, in my mind, more of a trial by fire. I just needed to go to New York and see what I could pull off. And so I went to New York and I lived there for the next 10 years of my life after that. And then moved to Nashville about 7 years ago.
Okay. Wow. So you went over your influences and inspirations a little bit, and this is where I normally ask you about them. However, I found this much more intriguing. You recently wrote an essay in honor of the late, great Sylvain Sylvain, the New York Dolls. Rest in peace, of course, whom you've been, touring guitars for as well with the New York Dolls.
Yeah.
The essay was featured in the spotlight of the Journal of Roots Music webpage, No Depression. You guys out there listening, check out the article at nodepression.com. But if you could share with us a little bit about how much of an influence and inspiration Sylvain Sylvain has not only impacted your music career, but your life as well.
Yeah, he was just an incredible guy, one of the most generous, kindest, people that you could hope to meet. And, a lot of what, what the New York Dolls became known for, Sylvain really kind of spearheaded and even, in some cases introduced into the band as far as how they looked. He had his own clothing company called Truth and Soul. And before he was ever in the New York Dolls, he taught Johnny Thunders, the chords on the guitar to play. And of course, he made all those fabulous big floppy hats that sort of became synonymous, with the New York Dolls in a lot of ways. up until he passed, made wonderful hats and jackets, and he, you know, created these things, but he didn't really create them in the spirit of keeping them all to himself. He created them in the spirit of giving his, you know, his style and his, you know, incredible love for rock and roll to anybody who is interested in it, you
Right.
know. And even, you know, that Dolls gig came along at a tough time in my life, you know, where I had quit my band, my first band, and they were really doing well. I quit the band, and then they got asked to open the Lady Gaga Monster Ball tour, and then they signed with Interscope Records.
Right.
And you know, I was basically playing covers in bars in New York on Bleecker Street, you know, at the Red Lion
Yeah.
from 10 to 3, you know, kind of a thing.
Wow.
And you know, lo and behold, I got this opportunity to tour with the Dolls. And Sylvain and I just bonded, you know, we became friends. So when he started doing some extra side projects outside of that group, he invited me to play guitar on those, which I did. And it was amazing. I got to play with some incredible musicians, you know, during that time. And then he saw me sing some of my own songs in a little tiny bar. And this was maybe in about 2013. And I was trying to figure out what to do, you know, sort of with my life. And he really encouraged me after that gig. It was crazy. Like he, you know, we talked for a few minutes afterwards, but he was like, man, you should really like go, you know, that's where you should be. What you just did with the singing and your songwriting and all that, like, it's really cool. You've got a knack for that. You should go for that. So, you know, I think to have somebody, you know, from a legendary band like that, really true originators of their time,
Yeah.
which you can't, not a lot of bands can say that, honestly.
Right.
You know, I think to have encouragement from somebody like that, it really, you know, turned my life around in a lot of ways. And I became much more serious about playing music and writing songs at that point, and much less serious about waking and baking every day, and kind of decided that, you know, I wanted to be a musician,
Yeah.
and not just a you know, some sort of bohemian hobo.
Yeah. No. So, I mean, it would be safe to say too, for you, just from that, you know, that experience, that kind of put you in your direction of your solo career.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, I moved to Nashville maybe a couple of months after that, you know, and threw myself full force into, I wanted to write at least a song every day, and make a full length solo record. And I did all that, you know, within about 6 months of moving to Nashville. So, you know, Sil really pushed me in that direction. And as I came to understand after he passed, that he actually did for many people. So that's just a tip of the hat to a great man right there.
Absolutely. So what would you say the future is now of the New York Dolls and your involvement, if any?
I mean, I can only assume that David, you know, is you know, is going to continue to do his solo shows and all that, and probably won't do the Dolls anymore. I mean, there was a special magnetic thing that Dave and Sil had, you know, and it really, it elevated the performances, you know, in a special way, where they kind of, you know, were almost, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but, you know, as a guy standing on the other side of the stage, you know, it was almost like they were kind of just like constantly raising the bar for each other, you know, and the show would just kind of get cooler and cooler and crazier, and Sil would have the whole, crowd singing along to trash, and and then we would shift into a reggae version of it, and David would just croon the crap out of it, man, because he's such a great vocalist, underappreciated as a singer, I think, in some ways. Like, he really is. His voice is pretty remarkable. But yeah, I can't imagine it. I can't imagine it without that. So I don't want to speak for those guys, but
of course,
I would think they would probably not be any more New York Dolls shows, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Never got to see them. But I mean, I'm in New York, and should have probably got on top of that at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, never happened. So besides the Dolls, you've toured and worked with some of the most prolific people in the industry: Sean Lennon, Jack White, Cara Delevingne, just to name a few. You've recently also had a live stream event with Willie Nelson. So we'll get into that. So during the pandemic over the past year, we've all had to, accept and overcome some great challenges. What were some of the challenges for you? And what happened during the Willie Nelson live stream?
Wonderful question, because I do think that's true, and what's been interesting about that is to sort of engage with some of those challenges and really have a perspective on them and go, well, this is difficult, but my friend Harry in New York is sick with COVID, and he's, laying in a bed all day long, wondering, like, is this it, kind of,
Right.
It was an interesting time to be presented with challenges of the sort that I feel like I faced, because it was instantly recognizable to me that, compared to what so many people were facing, how insignificant they were, and made me grateful in a way that, I was a very fortunate, individual in that regard,
Right.
but as you say, we all had our set of challenges.
Yeah.
It took me a minute to figure out the live streaming thing. I've become more technically savvy over the years as, recording has shifted entirely into, the place of digital and, all that kind of stuff. I've learned more, but I still, it's not my forte. So
yeah,
I got asked to do a 420 festival that Willie was hosting, and right before you play your song, you kind of go on the air with Willie, remotely, and you have a little chat, and his son Lucas was there, who I'd smoked weed with a couple of times, and is a cool guy. Really love his music too, super talented.
Yeah.
So the three of us had a nice little chat, and I played my song, and my pants matched my bedspread, and Willie really dug that. He thought that was really hip, so that made my day. But like so many things, there are elements that are out of your control in these situations, and so when I got done with my performance, there was and she turned out to be a music critic too, which of course she's a music critic,
of course.
But someone who had tuned in for the show, and apparently something happened with the stream or whatever, where my guitar just sounded really distorted or something weird, and it had absolutely terrorized her cat, to the point where the cat was running around the room just howling and like clawing at things and like really getting sort of animalistic and kind of violent almost. And she was really like laying it all out there in great detail. And so, you kind of like, I sort of had this experience of like, man, I just got to like, meet one of my biggest heroes of all time. And of course, the second I start playing my guitar, everything just goes haywire.
Yeah.
And I got really, I don't usually get like super angry. That's just not the kind of person I am.
Right.
But for some reason, that just really got under my skin to the point where I actually walked out the front door of our house to the garbage can in the street and threw my guitar in the trash can.
Wow.
And slammed the lid and then huffed and puffed back into the house.
Yeah.
And then like, realized like 15 minutes later, like, no, I guess I better go back outside and get my guitar out of the garbage,
Yeah.
Eeyore walking down the trash can. What a bummer. I met Willie Nelson.
Yeah. Listen, you had a moment, you had a moment. We all have moments,
Right.
There was times when, my computer wasn't working when I was doing this, or,
God.
Zoom would cut out or the internet would shut off. And I have broken things before. And I myself, my wife might disagree with me, but I'm not really an angry person either. I'm pretty much laid back. I'm very cool. Yeah. But if things don't work and they mess with my job, I get really, really pissed, So I do not blame you one bit. And listen, in the scope of things, yeah, I know people had, COVID and things like that, but everyone's problems don't mean they're smaller than the others,
Sure.
Does that make sense? I don't know.
It does. Yeah. Everybody. I think it's like
that was your moment.
And that for me, that was a particularly difficult moment.
Yeah. And I don't blame you, man. I mean, especially when it's involving someone you look up to and things like that. It's it's massive. When I do these things too, it's, some people, well, everyone that I have on here, I look up to.
Sure.
But yeah, if things go wrong, I get really, really pissed. So I don't blame you one bit. I really don't. But I'm glad you got the guitar.
Yeah.
Because I've done, I've broken things permanently. So
oh my.
I'm glad you got it back. I hope it wasn't that one on the wall there.
It wasn't. It was
I know. All right, so let's talk about the album a little bit.
Sure.
The new album, Tasjan. Some of the themes include challenges with your label, self-confidence, mental health, anxiety, even sexuality, just to name a few. Many of the songs are autobiographical. As a listener, this album sounds and feels lyrically grand and sonically daring. By the end of it, I feel like you're really sorted some shit out in life. So would that be a true statement? Do you really, kind of a cathartic album for you, or in a way?
It's funny, like
some things.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I got to do the bio for the record with the great Jan Uhelski, who, for those folks who don't know, Jan started, it was an originator of a very, very cool rock and roll magazine called Cream Magazine that was based out of Detroit City in the 1970s. And she helped me write my bio. And we were talking about the record, and we were getting to the end of our interview sessions for that. And she said, it just occurred to me that, the last 4 songs on the record are actually the, sort of, basically like the best songs on the record, because they sort of gave you this feeling that something had changed, even if you don't know exactly like what it is necessarily. It sort of gave you this kind of resolve, but like not like a storybook ending resolve. There's sort of a ... at the end of the record, almost like a to be continued kind of.
Right.
And actually a lot of the songs on this record like sort of have that element as well. Like I think what I've learned to do is sort of hold some space for who I will become, knowing that I'm, if I'm living life, as richly as I can, like I'm not going to be the same person 10 years from now that I am today.
Right.
In some way I will change. And so, yeah. So, a lot of that too, is some of where the record is coming from. But those last couple of songs, it's almost like and it's so funny how they roll out in that order too, because now is lyrically is pretty devastating, but by the time you get to Got What I Wanted, like it's sort of this acknowledgement of like man, it's like yin and yang, you know what I mean? Like there are always these elements that are going to exist, that I'm going to have to find a way to either fight against or engage with in a way that I can continue to have a healthy, positive outlook on life and believe in the basic goodness of people, because there is real evil in the world. It exists, and it always will. That's the thing. We're never going to vanquish these these difficult parts of what we have to live with. And so in a lot of ways, that's kind of what Got What I Wanted is like. It's a surrender, but it's also like at the same time sort of a call to action in a way. It's like you have to let go of these things, but then you also realize that as part of that process, like there are things you can do to maintain that healthier, more loving place once you find the ways to get your mind there, so right. It in a way, it is kind of a resolve of so many things that I talked about on the record. But like I was saying, it's not like a permanent resolve. It's just sort of an acknowledgement of the fact that I can I can transcend this stuff. I just have to do the work required to make it happen.
Right. It's almost like, you've accepted these things, and not that they're going to go away,
right? But
that they are there, they exist, and you've acknowledged them and faced them. And it's beautiful. I love it. The album truly has a unique sound. You spoke about it a little bit before, but the guitar actually does kind of sound like a synth on a lot of it. So how did you make the vision come to life during the production of this record?
It was a lot of trial and error, honestly. I mean, it was kind of like, and I'll say to that end, like a lot of times too, it wasn't like, oh, we tried this and then we tried that, and now we've tried this and that's it. It was sort of like, well, we have 3 different things that could all work. Which one is the one, and you kind of had to sit with it for a minute. You kind of had to allow the time for the song to sort of speak for itself. Like it eventually, like all of this stuff, starts to communicate what the record is. And I think that's why I felt compelled to record the album the way which I did, which was over a long period of time in short bursts, because when you did the short burst, then you could have a break, and I would have to go on tour or whatever, but you could have a break from recording. It would give you a chance to hear what you'd done and sort of, allow the song to kind of realize itself, in your imagination, and then go, oh, I see. So all 3 of these things would work, but aesthetically what this song is doing is this. And so therefore this one of the 3 really fits the best because it's helping get the lyric across, or it's supporting the mood of the song, in a way that the other 2 don't,
Right.
So it was like, it was easier to make those choices when you had the space in the moment. But a lot of times it just took patience like that to let it play out in a way where, it eventually kind of spoke to you, and then the whole record started to do that. That's what was cool about that, because I actually recorded 21 songs, and so there were 10 songs that didn't make the record, that I didn't even finish actually recording, because it became apparent like these 11s were the ones,
Right.
But I just was grateful for that time, time spent away from recording in between the sessions, to be able to kind of make some of those judgment calls and like really developed like an instinct and a feeling for what the record was becoming.
Sure. You gave me a little inspiration for another question here. I do this all the time when I record a podcast. I don't like to cut anything out.
Sure.
It's really weird. Like, yeah, if I mess up or something, I'll cut it out, or if someone wants me to cut something out, I'll cut it out. But I hate scrapping anything. So how do you scrap the songs? How do you scrap the songs?
It's, man, you really have to like, I've had to really just do some ego work, you know, like as part of the process of like being a better artist, you know, and allowing myself to just go, yeah, I love this. Like, I love what I created. Like, I can even listen to it obsessively and like pick out all the little things that I like about it and stuff like that. But, you know, I started asking myself the question, you know, really on this record of kind of like, what's the goal for this music? Like, what do I hope to achieve with it? You know, what do I want, you know, people to feel when they hear it? And that became especially more kind of heavy on my mind, like, because I was finishing the album as the pandemic was kicking off. Like, I started mixing this record in April, you know, 2020, and knowing that I would put it out this year, obviously, but like, still, you know, I was thinking a lot about that, like, as we were mixing the record and then sequencing it and getting it ready for mastering and all that kind of stuff. And I just, you know, I wanted to keep the heavy subject matter in, because I felt like it did, you know, give the record a certain balance. But I also wanted to just create music that just felt joyful, you know, that somebody could honestly like just be having a terrible day and go, you know what, I just want to dance around in my kitchen for 10 minutes. You know, let me put on Up All Night or whatever, you know,
Absolutely.
and have some fun for a second, you know, like it was very much designed with that intention, like knowing it was going to come out during this time. So
that's such a great intention. It really is, you know. That's some of the reviews, you know, I read some of the reviews for the album. Paper stated Aaron Lee is the antidote for anxious times. Associated Press, Aaron Lee, Tasjan delivers the best album yet. I got your name right. Spin, Tasjan marries bouncy musicality with fraught clever lyrics. Rolling Stone calls Aaron Nashville's most eclectic singer-songwriter. I couldn't agree more with all of it. And guys listening out there, be sure to download Tasjan anywhere you stream. The vinyl's out March 19th, which I personally cannot wait for, because I'm definitely getting it. I got a couple like quick anecdotes for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, some interesting things. Aaron Lee Tasjan trivia, if you will. Okay. So you've had a few Twitter spats with Peter Frampton and David Crosby. What were these spats about, and were they resolved?
Oh, I love that. Yes. So the Peter Frampton one, which me and my buddy Todd Snyder lovingly refer to as Frampton Gate 2018, was a total accident. It was one of those things where I was exchanging tweets with someone else, not realizing that they had also included Peter in the replies or whatever. So he was seeing everything I was tweeting, and I was sarcastically, you know, saying that I was sorry that I had brought up Peter Frampton to this guy, who seemed to be really frustrated that I was, you know, talking about that or whatever. And I think Peter just saw the part where I was like, sorry for bringing up Frampton, what a drag. And of course on social media, there's no context for irony or sarcasm or any of this kind of stuff. So he's just looking at this thing being like, man, like, what the heck why is this guy like being, you know, dogging on me so much? So he blocked me and sort of was like, why is this guy such a jerk? And then of course all his fans were like, why are you being mean to Peter Frampton? He's like the nicest guy. And I was like, man, I know, I feel so bad. It was a total like accident. I was actually being sarcastic. Like, I'm a huge fan of Peter Frampton's. And somebody eventually, who I think knew both of us, realized what was happening and like wrote Peter like a personal message and was like, hey, actually I'm a mutual friend of Aaron's. He is like a legitimate, he loves you. He thinks you're one of the best guitar players like ever. And Frampton was just so cool about it. He was just like, oh shoot, like I'm really sorry, man, like my bad, you know. And
it had to be relieving.
I mean, so cool. And so he, you know, he and I have kind of become internet buddies, and I've read his book, which is remarkable. If you haven't read Peter's book that he put out this past year, it's really, really great. Some wonderful, amazing stories about Pete Townsend and all kinds of great stuff. Highly recommend it. Yeah, the Crosby thing, that one unfortunately did not get resolved, but it was I get the impression from reading Neil Young interviews that that's kind of typical with David Crosby, so I'm not super worried about it. I think he's a great musician, certainly, but yeah, it was basically, he loves to go on this trip every once in a while that rap is not music, and I disagree with that. And so he had some folks weighing in on a thread about that at one point, and I replied to one of them, and you know, I could tell he was of an older generation, and I was like, look man, you know, your generation made music a revolution. Like, this music is the revolution of my time, you know, like this is our musical revolution, is this music. And so you can't say, it's not up to you to decide whether it's music or not, you know. In the same way that like the generation that came before you was critical of rock and roll, but like it wasn't up to them to make that call, you know. Ultimately it endured and gave us so much that we're still taking from and employing, using to this day across all kinds of different genres. So yeah, I think David thought I was trying to say that he was racist or something by you know, saying that, and sort of replied to me like, you know, it's so dumb of you to think that I'm being racist, which I didn't think he was being racist. I was just trying to point out to one of his followers that I just thought it was weird that a generation whose music had meant so much to them couldn't understand that happening for another generation.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. I would have backed you up if I saw that one. Yeah, no, that's first of all, I'm glad that got resolved with Frampton.
Yeah,
that must have been relieving.
It was,
man.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan. I mean, I respect Crosby too, but Frampton, like, I'm a huge fan of his.
Right. So you've done Mushrooms with Bono. Please describe this experience in full detail, if you would.
Absolutely. 2012, I was in Europe. I'd been playing lead guitar for a band that was half English and half Swedish, and we've been touring all over Europe. And my friend BP Fallon, longtime buddy of mine, managed my first band, but long before that was the publicist for Led Zeppelin from 72 to 79, was the publicist for T-Rex, you know, man, worked at Apple Records like in the 60s, was an incredible radio personality in Ireland, and hosted some really cool interviews with many of the biggest rock stars of that time, and then wrote a brilliant book later on in life about U2 called Far Away Close, which I highly suggest checking out if you haven't read it and are a U2 fan, or if you're not a U2 fan. It's just really interesting stuff. But through the making of that book, obviously he got to know those guys pretty well. So BP asked me if I would come to Ireland when I was in the middle of this European tour and play a show with him at a festival there called the Electric Picnic Festival, which is a really cool festival that they do just outside of Dublin there, and all kinds of different bands. This particular time, one of our very favorite singers, Patti Smith, the Miss Patti Smith, was performing, and we have a buddy in that band, Lenny Kay, the guitar player. And so Lenny joined us for our set, which we did earlier that afternoon. And then said to me and BP, come see, me and Patty are playing with the band at such and such a time. Come see us. We'll hang out afterwards for a few minutes, etc. So we figure, BP's like, look, man, I got these mushrooms, I mean, it's Patti Smith. We know she's going to probably sing Power to the People. I mean, if ever there's been a time to hear that song on mushrooms, this seems like it. Yeah. So we went for it, and Patty's show was fantastic. We found like a whole patch of grass next to the tent where we could just sort of like really go for it, man, and just dance, and you know how you do when you're tripping. And the show finishes, and we're like just feeling like a million, whatever your favorite currency is. And and we were like, all right, let's go. We'll go say hi to Lenny. So we're walking back around to the backstage, and we're sort of talking like this as we're walking forward. So we're not really looking where we're going. But I can see out of the corner of my eye, there's somebody coming towards us. And I'm thinking, this is security. I mean, I'm thinking of what the two of us look like, what we've just been doing, what we probably smell like. I'm like, I'd kick us out too. This guy's walking towards us. I pull my jacket open to get my pass out to show him that we're artists. And as I'm doing this, BP kind of goes, hey, man, like sort of like he knows the person or whatever. And they start kind of having a conversation, and I can't find my pass because I'm high on mushrooms. And I look up, and I'm just thinking to myself, I know this guy. I don't know why I know this guy, but I know this guy. And BP says, stops his conversation at a certain point and goes, yeah, Aaron, and by the way, this is Bono. And I swear to God, I shook his hand, and I was like, man, it's great to meet you. You're an amazing singer. And he said, he goes, like it was Braveheart or something. He goes, I saw he is over there dancing in the field earlier to Patty. And I thought, freedom.
That's amazing.
So then he goes, so I'm just like, I'm totally tickled. Bono thinks my dancing is like freedom. I'm just like, I'm on mushrooms. I'm in Ireland. It's like, I'm just hitting home runs left and right. and Bono goes, do you like Sigur Rós? And I said, I do. I've never seen him. And he said, well, they're about to play. You want to go watch Sigur Rós?
Wow.
And I was like, yes. I definitely do.
Nah.
So me and Bono and BP walk over to the side of the stage, and we walk up onto the thing, and we're standing there, and we're watching Sigur Rós. They sound incredible. And then I look to my other side, and there's the Edge standing there all of a sudden, and he starts striking up a conversation, like they kind of finished off their set or whatever. And he's like, talking to me or whatever. And I started to get the impression that maybe he wasn't sure that I knew who he was, because he kept trying to drop these hints to me, like we're in the studio, and and me and Bono are working in the studio, and I'm just like losing my shit and just being like, do I is it cool like, can I say Bono too, or like, should I not? I don't want to upset anybody, and so we had this great conversation. I ended up probably because I was on mushrooms, I ended up talking to him about, do you remember that video that they did in the 90s? I can't remember which song it was, but he just basically is sitting, the Edge is sitting in a chair, and they're just rapping his entire. That's it. It was Numb.
Yeah.
So we had a great conversation about getting your face wrapped up with string. It was a dream come true, really. You know,
that's insane. I mean, you know, we're this little band called U2. If you ever heard of us, that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Me and Bono have been in the studio. You know?
I had, right. I had the opportunity to see them live actually, and it was amazing because it was Madison Square Garden.
Yeah,
and we had tickets like maybe in like the first seats, but they were coming around giving people random, like, you can get in the middle of the pit kind of tickets.
I love when bands do that
for free, and they picked us as part of the people. So we were literally, it was I think it was the Elevation tour. It was 2002, around there, and we were in the middle of the Heart. They had a heart-shaped stage,
right?
And we were just like dead center. And I mean, if someone asked me now, I don't know, I might be a little too old to be that crammed in. I mean, we were like anchovies in a can, you know. But it's unforgettable. It was amazing. They were incredible live, and it was probably one of the best concerts I've ever been to in my life.
Every time I hear about a band doing that, it makes me so happy because you know, it's like those people, you know, who they're taken from those back rows and bringing down to the front like that. They would have seen the show from outside if they could have. You know what I mean? They're those people really want to be there. So it's like they deserve to come down and get to see the band.
Absolutely.
You know what
Absolutely.
I mean?
You know, and you don't have to pay like $1,000 a ticket, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
The people who buy the back rows usually don't have $1,000 a ticket.
Right.
So
Indeed.
So it's just a win-win.
It is. It's awesome.
So that's an incredible story. And thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Bowling with Yoko Ono. This is another good one.
Me and BP and Sean and Sean's lady Charlotte and Irina Lazarino and a couple other groovy folks all sort of had this sort of momentary band, improvisational band called Operation Juliet. And the premise behind the band was just, let's get up there and just make something up. Like sometimes we would play Jimi Hendrix or something like that. But then, you know, Irina or, you know, someone would just sort of wander up onto the stage and start doing some spoken word in the middle of it. You know what I mean? It's just kind of mayhem, really. Adam Green from Moldy Peaches was a part of it a couple of times. And, you know, it was a really fun adventure. So it was Charlotte's, Sean's partner, Charlotte. It was her birthday, and they decided to rent out a bowling alley called Bowlmore, which was over near like NYU kind of area.
Yep.
So yeah, they rented out the whole thing, of course. And so I show up for the party, like not quite knowing what to expect. And, you know, it's like, you know, BP was like, all right, well, you know, we don't really bowl, but, you know, we'll be part of the bowling teams or whatever. And so our team, it was me and BP, you know, Sean and Charlotte, Yoko, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
What?
and Nels Klein from Wilco.
Wow.
The guitar player from Wilco.
Wow.
I had just seen Nels weirdly do a completely improvised show of nothing but Willie Nelson songs at the Living Room in New York, like a couple of weeks before that with Jim Campolongo. So I sort of started off, you know, having a conversation with Nels about that. And what I noticed was, you know, I was close enough to Yoko that we could have had a conversation, but it never quite materialized. She would just sort of point to different people and say, now, who is this in the hat? You know, who's this man here in the hat? And, you know, Sean or whoever would kind of say, oh, it's Aaron, and he plays music with us sometimes, and blah, 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 blah. And so there was a huge picture that at the end, Charlotte's gift, which they bestowed upon her in the middle of all this, was a baby white python snake, which was an albino python, which was a gorgeous creature. And of course, you know, one would only present such a gift in a bowling alley, naturally. So kudos on both fronts there. But there was a big picture out front with everybody at the end. And my first thought is, oh, I got to take a picture of this. I mean, you know, these people are never going to, you know, think of all these crazy people that are together in this one area. I'm never going to get a chance to take a picture like this ever again. So, you know, I went to the front and took a couple of snaps or whatever. And we're walking away after the photo was done. And BP was furious with me for not realizing that I should have gotten in the that it was a better idea to be in the picture than it was to take it. But, you know, I'm just, man, I'm such a, like, the truth about me is, like, I'm as big a fan of music as anything. And so I was just as happy to be able to say I took the picture as if I had actually gotten in it. But BP, of course, being the consummate publicist, you know, just couldn't believe how foolish that I'd be to take the picture instead of being in it.
Right. So how well did she bowl?
Oh, very well.
Yeah.
Very well. Yeah. She had great form. She looked fantastic, wonderful energy. Yeah. I mean, Yoko, I think is actually an incredible musician. And as you know, as time has gone on, we've learned more and more about how much she actually participated in the writing of songs like Imagine and, you know, all that kind of stuff. A lot of that came from Yoko, and you know, her influence on John was big as well, you know, and John really celebrated and trusted her instincts in a lot of ways. So I'm a huge Yoko fan, and always will be. I hate the rap that she's gotten, you know. I think it says a lot about, you know, how we treat women in society, honestly, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. One woman came along and ruined the Beatles, right?
Yeah, right.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So another story here, notable, partying with Kate Moss in London.
Yeah, that was a great one. And that was that was, you know, BP Fallon management at its finest. He had become friends with Kate through the years, so this was when I was in Semi-Precious Weapons, and these were our first we'd never been to England before. And so BP orchestrated this trip to England for us, and got Alan McGee, who is the man that started Creation Records, signed Oasis, My Bloody Valentine, Primal Scream, you know, one Teenage Fan Club, so many amazing British rock bands and Scottish rock bands, and really, really great stuff. And so Alan wrote a article about our band in the newspaper in England, and said that the name of the article was something like the most important band in America, or something incredibly pretentious like that. But everybody came to our shows because of it.
Right.
And BP talked Kate into coming down. So Kate comes to our show, and we're all on stage freaking out, like, man, she's back there. This is amazing. And she looks like she's having a good time, you know?
Yeah.
Stays for the whole thing. After the show is over, you know, everybody meets Kate, you know, it's BP's like, you know, Kate, these are the boys, fellas, this is Kate Moss, you know, da-da-da-da-da, you know, and it's this night in London called Death Disco. And so there's some cool groovy rock and roll music playing in between the band sets. And so we just start dancing, you know, all of us. We're just, you know, we hear great music and we feel compelled to move around. So we did. Kate kind of just joined right in with us, and BP runs and grabs his camera and starts snapping photographs, right? The next day, he sent them to Kate and said, you know, I can't believe he had the balls to do this. God bless him. He said, is there any way that you would allow me to distribute these photographs? And because Kate Moss is rock and roll as hell till the day she dies, man. She
Wow.
is pure rock and roll. She said, yes, go for
Wow.
it. And we were on the cover of the tabloid papers in London. You know, our singer and Kate Moss on the front page, and it said, you know, Kate Moss parties with 6-foot bisexual. Was the headline, you know, and it was like, you know, we made this big splash in England because BP, you know, was as usual not afraid to go the extra mile for his artists, and Kate Moss is cool as hell, and we got a really cool, you know, little pump push for our band out of that. So forever thank you to Kate Moss for being awesome. Forever thank you to BP for being smart and good at his job.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, she sounds awesome.
Yeah, very cool lady.
Very cool. So Jimmy Iovine, I think that's how you say it.
Yes. Yeah.
Once told you guys in makeup don't sell records anymore.
Yeah.
What was your response if there was one, and if not, what would you like to say to him now?
Yeah, it you know, it kind of came down the pipeline. There was a guy named Tony Ferguson who worked at Interscope at the time, who became really interested in semi-precious weapons, and even flew to New York from LA to see us play and the whole 9 yards. And we played at CBGB's and had a great show, at a sold out show at CBGB's, and he really dug us and made it his mission to sign our band to Interscope, and finally got it all the way up to Jimmy Iovine, you know, who was the guy calling all those shots at the time. And I don't know how much of our music or record he listened to, or I don't know how. I kind of got the impression he took a look at our photo and made this comment, and that was as much as he knew about our band. I could be wrong, but it just felt
Probably
like
not.
a really flippant. It felt like something you would say about something you didn't know anything about to me. Because you know, he basically told that to Tony. He said, you know, no offense, but men in makeup don't sell records anymore, which I just thought was hilarious, because I think Jared Leto was like, had the 30 Seconds to Mars thing going on, and that dude had more eyeliner on than like Lucille Ball used to wear, like on the old show with Desi Arnaz. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that was his response, and I think we, like we did with a lot of things like that we encountered in semi-precious weapons, sort of this thinly veiled, you know, in a way, just kind of ignorance about, you know, who we were and what it was that we were doing. We laughed it off because, you know, to us, I mean, you know, Justin and I used to literally go around the neighborhood and collect empty soda cans to take to Key Food to put in the soda machine to get money to buy dinner. You know, that's what it was like when we started our band, you know? So the fact that we were now in a place where Jimmy Iovine could tell us that men in makeup don't sell records, we, you know, that felt like we were making progress, you know?
Yeah.
And we did eventually get a record deal. And funny enough, because Lady Gaga had opened for our band, when she became a huge star, they gave her her own imprint on Interscope, and then she signed Semi-Precious Weapons to Interscope. So they made it there after all, you know, which I think is a beautiful, cool part of the story, and a testament to the fact that great music, great songs, great artists prevail no matter what people tell them. So no matter what you hear, you know, from people in that position of power, you know, I don't give up, man. Don't let it like stop you from trying, because if what you do is good and you're passionate about it, it's gonna make it anyway. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Everything has its place.
Yes.
You know, it may take longer to get there, but everything eventually makes its way.
Totally.
So a couple quick fun questions. First record you bought.
Oh man. That would
if you remember.
Yeah, I sure do. That would have been What's the Story, Morning Glory by Oasis.
Great,
It was like
great record.
I bought it on cassette. I remember we went to Coconut Music and I bought it on cassette tape. And I listened to it so much that I had to buy a new cassette tape. Because remember, sometimes if you overplayed cassettes, the tape would wear out, basically.
Yep.
I totally did that in 1 year to that record.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to wind it up with the pencil.
Yeah, totally.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the last record you bought?
Oh, let's see. The last record that I bought would be, I just bought a record by a guy named Ty Segall, who's a great garage rock sort of innovator in a lot of ways. I'm really doing some interesting things with it. But the name of the record is First Taste, and it's a totally it's a totally like punk rock, garage rock, wild sounding record, but there are no electric instruments. Everything that he played on the record is completely acoustic. Wow. So I've never quite heard anything exactly like it. It's really, really interesting.
Ty Segall, I want to check that out.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Don't you miss record stores?
Oh God, yes.
I mean, I know they still exist and vinyl has made a huge comeback.
Yes.
But you really have to look for a record store. You know what I mean? Yeah. When I was growing up in the 80s, you would trip and fall into another record store. There was so many of them, even in just the mall around the corner. Yeah. There would be like 5 record stores, Yeah. But now it's kind of hard to come across. I really miss physical media, and I miss going to the store and just spending a couple hours in there and going through everything. And
absolutely.
Now it's become so, everything's digitized, obviously, and it's become so too convenient, if you ask me.
Do you find like you do less fun stuff? Like, remember how sometimes you'd go in the store and look around for a while and you didn't know it, but you would just buy a record because the cover looked really cool?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you don't do that online.
Absolutely.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't do that.
No, right. Well, online, you have the option to listen to it, preview it.
I guess that's a very good point.
Now it's like
you don't need to.
Yeah. But I've absolutely exactly.
Stoner brain, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
It's all good, man. I have the same brain. But there's no doubt that I've gone into a record store before for hours and just bought something based on the cover. I
totally
absolutely judged by cover, and some of those records are probably my favorite records of all time.
Me too.
So go figure.
Yeah.
But that, the convenience of everything now, just that kind of stuff doesn't exist.
I know.
But maybe, things come back, everything comes back, and obviously records have come back, and hopefully it just keeps going,
I sure hope so too.
Maybe video stores will start coming back. Who knows?
Blockbuster, man.
Blockbuster, yeah.
Be renting videos again.
That was my Friday night. Every Friday night, go to Blockbuster.
Oh yeah.
Dude, now it's
Dominoes, man.
Click on Netflix and whatever's on.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Everything's changed so much. So what's next for you?
We are hopefully going to play a couple of sort of outdoor, safely distanced, etc. shows over the course of the summer. We're really being super, careful about the safety protocol and all that for all those events. So, we're hoping that we'll be able to pull that off and give some people some chances to come out and see some live music this summer. That's probably the most exciting thing on the horizon right now. Although I have actually started recording a new project, which I only have 3 songs tracked for so far, but I'm working with a couple of the musicians from Father John Misty's band.
I love Father
Elijah.
John Misty.
Me too. I'm a big fan. But their bass player, Elijah Thompson, who's a wonderful producer and produced Nathaniel Ratliff and Delta Spirit and some really great music that I love. And then also their guitar player, David Vandervelde, who's an incredible artist in his own right, but also obviously plays in the Misty band as well. So it's been fun. The 3 of us have been collaborating on songwriting as well as production and stuff like that. So it's been a really engaging project in that way, and also something that I haven't really done before, where most of the time I just write all the songs pretty much more or less by myself. So collaborating in this way with members of a band that I really love and admire has been a really fun sort of new project to kind of get started on, especially during this time. It's like to have anything to work on, I think feels like a real blessing. So yeah, totally.
And the idea of, being able to, even if it's a small crowd, get out there again.
I know.
I can't even imagine how much you miss it. I miss it as a fan, just going to a concert,
I'll probably get emotional, honestly.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will. And I think once things start really get rolling again, it's just going to be a madhouse. Everything's going to be like packed to the gills. And I think it's going to be good for artists to get back out there and for people to be able to get back out there and, eventually when it's obviously safe enough to get all back together and come together again.
Absolutely. No, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I feel the same way. I feel the exact same way. And I think that time is slowly approaching, and as long as we can, do it, thoughtfully and with, keeping our neighbors and friends and family in mind, I think it's going to be a really beautiful thing.
Absolutely. I got my Hall & Oates tickets from last year.
Yeah, dude.
They were postponed. Till this year, this August.
God.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to be going,
Those songs, man. What a great collection of songs those guys have. Wow.
Seriously. I mean, when you have a greatest hits album and it's 30 songs on it and every single one of them is good and it's unbelievable.
It really is.
Yeah. So before we go, I have one more question to ask you, and I ask everybody. On a scale from 1 to hell fucking yeah, how much did you enjoy being here today?
I'm gonna have to give it a hell fucking yeah and a double devil horns at that.
Yes. Aaron, it was a pleasure talking to you, man. It really was. You have a great energy, and your new album is amazing. I really love it, and I can't wait to get on vinyl on March 19th. The day it comes out, I'm getting that. Hopefully it's on Amazon Prime.
Absolutely.
So I get it right away. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
No, this was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Thank you so much for having me on.
I love to hear that.
And for the great questions. It's always fun to get into some areas that you don't always get into, and so thanks for going the extra mile.
I appreciate that.
Cool questions.
Thank you. I try to do that. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much again for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for your time so much. And of course, anytime, we can even do it again one day if, your next project comes out or big tour is coming up, we'll
awesome.
Put another one out there.
Awesome.
So,
thank you,
Aaron, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
And I look forward to hearing some music and hopefully seeing you one day on tour.
Yes, indeed.
All right.
Rock on.
Rock on, man. Thank you.
Hell fucking yeah! It's the Hell Fucking Yeah podcast.